Welcome, 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 everybody, this beautiful day to this Inner Development Goals gathering, focusing on forgiveness, the latest contribution to the Inner Development Goals framework of skills and competencies needed to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Ola Jubelin. I'm coordinator of these gatherings, which are the steady monthly heartbeat of the ever-expanding Inner Development Goals movement. And we're here to get a chance to dive into the practical applications of these skills with the help of extraordinary individuals and organizations who are drivers for the important transformational work that's going on all around the world. Today we have a very powerful session before us with some very inspiring contributors who are going to give life to the theme of forgiveness. And to guide us through today's theme, I have Åsa Jarskog with me as well, Director of Global Programs at the Inner Development Goals. And welcome, Åsa. And most importantly, today, outside of our contributors, we also have all of you, or all of us in the room, gathering together right here, right now. And sorry, just gonna put the gallery view again. I can see you. We're gathering and joining today from across the globe, and a warm welcome to everybody who's here, and to you who are joining and taking part of this after the fact. A warm welcome. So to just allow us to land into this space together, I want to invite you all to just take some breaths together. So you can close the tabs on your computer and just mute your microphone for a moment and just land here into the space, all of us together. You can, I welcome you to close your eyes or to soften your gaze a little bit and just draw your attention to your breath. Breathing in and breathing out. I invite you to breathe a little bit deeper and a little bit slower than you have so far today. Taking that inhale. And the same for the exhale, just a little bit deeper and a little bit further. And after the next breath, you can softly come back to the room together again. You can turn on your cameras, turn on gallery view, just have a good look into each other's eyes and feel the togetherness and connectedness. And with that, I hand over the word to Åsa to introduce our contributors for today. And yes, please, Åsa.
Thank you, Ola. It's wonderful to be here, and especially with this wonderful panel that I've had the pleasure to speak to a few times before this session, of course, and I think we all have a lot to learn from them. I work with global programs, just like Ola said, in the IDGs. And for me, it has become so clear that when we work with this, when we start taking the IDG framework to different countries in the world, It is not the world that is learning from us, it is the framework that is learning from the world. And the world is enriching this framework for every time we bring it to a new place. So we're going to share a short video with you on how it came about that forgiveness came into this program, into the IDG framework. It is not yet one of the IDG capacities, but who knows, maybe it will be in the future. So I'm going to hand back over to you, Ulloa, and ask you to share the video. And for those who may have bad connections, we can put the video in the chat so that they can watch it.
There's a saying in Rwanda that if you don't forgive, prepare 2 graves.
To get to forgiveness, you need the truth to be known. You need to disclose, you need to confess.
In the development goals is a framework of the human capacities that are important in order to reach sustainability in the world. And the framework was developed by researchers predominantly from the Western world. And now it's time to listen to the other perspectives, the other voices, the other experiences. So we are gathering people from 4 continents to learn from their respective cultures and experience. And Rwanda has a very unique experience to share from their forgiveness process. And maybe forgiveness could be one of the new inner development goals capacities. Let's hear some more about that.
Forgiveness is common value you would like your kids to apply in normal life, and but for Rwanda it's particular when it comes to relating the forgiveness values to the genocide against the Tutsi that took away 1 million lives in 1994. So forgiveness is part of the unity and the reconciliation process that has been established by the leadership of our country to try to rebuild the cohesion among Rwandans.
Att försonas innehåller också ett element där vi befriar oss själva. Det handlar inte i första hand om att ta in den andra och den andres brott mot mig eller mot vårt samhälle, utan det handlar också om att avhärda sig själv bördan av att gå runt och känna sig oförsonad. Och det tror jag är en nyckel i försoningsprocessen, att vi inser att det är inget värdigt mänskligt liv att gå oförsonade med våra medmänniskor. Vi kan leva utan att kunna förlåta, men försoningen handlar om att läka våra mänskliga relationer, även där vi har begått brott mot varandra. Jag har träffat Desmond Tutu flera gånger och han skrev en bok om detta.
It's not easy. It's never easy to forgive. It's never easy to be reconciled. It's not cheap. It cost God the death of his son.
We used to be one nation. We used to be Rwandans living together, liking each other, helping each other, until the colonial period, until Belgium came and divided us and use physical differences, use socio-economic differences to divide Rwandans. So that has led to the genocide, it has led to discrimination, and with the support of the government that was in place in 1994 and before, it doesn't say we forgot what happened. It doesn't say we don't carry on this painful feeling, but we decided not to revenge. We decided not to live all our life with this anger. We decided to rebuild our country together with whoever wanted to join the movement, want to join the journey. When I look at the pillars of the IDGs, caring for others, collaborating, relating with others, those are beautiful and great qualities, as I said. But without forgiveness, and we know we are all human beings, we all need to be forgive. We all default. So forgiveness is something we all need. And I believe this should be part of the IDGs to be complete.
So forgiveness is one example of a human capacity that can help us accelerate the sustainability work in the world. And most probably we will include it in the framework of in the development goals. But that's just one example. What about your reality? Do you have ideas on human capacities that are important for sustainability? And do you have tools and methods that we can use to develop those capacities? We look forward to hearing from you.
So that's how we came about to start looking into another capacity, and I'm sure there are many more. And when it comes to forgiveness, we're about to hear some very moving stories from very extreme situations. But I think all of us has been in situations when we needed to decide to forgive or not. And I'm sure all of you have experienced from that sort of challenge to forgive sometimes. I have, and I actually even managed to forgive a person who is no longer with us. But I think there have been many sort of obstacles for me to forgive in different times of my life. And I'd like to ask you, what are the obstacles you have experienced that have disabled you from forgiving? Maybe you overcame them, maybe you still have not overcome them. Please share in the chat. Let's see if people are writing something here. Anger, pride, blame, resentment, stubbornness, fear, pain, hurt, ego, hurt, pride, safety, time. Oh yeah. Hurt. Thank you so much. A lot of important words coming up here. Just keep writing. Just keep writing in the chat the words that come to you. And I'll let Ulloa give us a little bit of framing of this session.
Thank you, Åsa, and thank you everyone for your contributions. Yeah, I think it's so important to make this make the linkage between the structural issues and the very personal. I think that's a big part of what this is about for me. What are the qualities that we need to individually work on, but also as organizations and structures. So just to give you a little bit of, for those of you especially who are joining us for the first time in these gatherings, I want to just mention to you briefly the structure of the session. We'll be having contributions from our invited speakers or contributors for the first part of the session. And then we always give space for sharing and exchanging between us, because that's such an important aspect of this, to connect with each other across the globe. So we have breakout rooms planned after the contributions. And then after that, we also have what we call an afterglow. It's another extended opportunity, another half hour after the sort of formal end of the session. We have a more informal chance to talk amongst each other, also thematically talk. Perhaps if you're interested in starting a hub in your area or in your region, we always invite that in this growing movement. And also the speakers who are able to will also stay behind to answer any further questions after the session in this afterglow, which will be self-chosen breakouts. So if there's anyone who wants to talk then about a specific theme, please do let me know. in the chat and private chat, and I can we'll connect and make that happen. So thank you.
Beautiful. So now for the moment that we have all been waiting for, to meet our panelists. And of course, we would like to have a long discussions, each one of us with them. But don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat, and we will find time. If not during the session, we can find it in the afterglow, because I know that all speakers have agreed to meet you in the afterglow in a room to try to respond to your questions or to discuss with you. So I feel very humbled to introduce the panel to you today. It's two people that have had extreme experiences, but have taken on those experiences in an absolutely beautiful way. One of them is an old friend. I know where you live, Freddy. And that is Freddy Mutanguha from Kigali. And you are a survivor from the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, when your family was wiped out, and you have dedicated your life to working with forgiveness. And you are originally, you have a degree in education from Rwanda, and you work as an international lecturer on the impact of the genocide and post-conflict reconstruction. And you have become a leading advocate for peace and human rights education, preventing similar catastrophes to appear in different parts of the world. You are also the director of the Genocide Memorial, and also, of course, executive director of the Aegis Trust in Rwanda. And I have been on a tour with you in that museum, and that was a very touching experience. And you've come here to share your story, your real life story with us. So please go ahead, Freddy, and welcome.
Just checking if everyone can hear me. Right. So thank you very much, Elsa, and thank you very much, everyone, to give me this opportunity to talk to you now and share my story. And you have to stop me at some point. Last time I gave my testimony, it took 5 hours. So I will try to be brief and by sharing my story, and also talk a little bit about my journey for forgiveness. Starting from myself, as you mentioned, Elsa, I'm Freddy Mutanguha. I'm a survivor of genocide at Tutsi. In 1994, I was 18 years old. I lost my parents, and I lost 4 sisters. I would like to ask Ulloa to show 2 pictures of. So these are only pictures I got after genocide. This is actually those small few pictures survived from really, they are faded, and you can see really they are not good pictures, not very visible, but there's only pictures that survived from my home. So you can see my mom, you can see my dad, and 4 sisters I lost in 1994. So when I count members of my family I lost, in Africa, we talk about your direct family and extended family when we talk about uncles, aunties, and grandparents. And so I lost around 80 members of my family. Those are people I saw, and for sure we have other many that I didn't see, I didn't meet before 1994. So this was genocide, and it happened to Rwanda. And the Rwanda, just giving you a little bit background on what happened, and I will come back to my own story and very quickly. So I will say Rwanda was inhabited for 3 groups for centuries. Those people who spoke the same language, having same culture, praying from one God. and having intermarriage, and was even possible to move from one group to another group according to your lifestyle, economic well-being. These are Tutsis who were pastoralists and cattle herders, and Hutu the farmers, and the Twa they're living by gathering fruit and hunting in the forest. But these have been a unity, as Ambassador mentioned, until in 1900s when the colonial power actually get into country, first colonized by Germans, and later on after First World War, the Belgians, and they brought a politics of divided rule, because with united society like this one, to be able to rule them, we have to divide them. So they first favored Tutsis, and when the Tutsis start to realize how they're really imposing and changing the culture, changing the way they pray, because the missionaries have been really working closely with the colonial powers, they hated Tutsis, and then even incited the Hutus to turn against the Tutsi, and they selected most extremist Hutus to come to power. The king was Tutsi was killed, and another king was expelled to outside the country. They didn't only ask the Hutus to turn against the Tutsis, but they incite them to kill them, and then forcing the Tutsis to exile. This was mostly 1959. The story is too long, and I'll start by when my father, actually this in 1959, like more than 20,000 people were killed, and those, and then others, 1,000 actually were expelled outside the country. And my family remained behind, but you can imagine those people who didn't have a chance to go out the country. They were humiliated. They were tortured. Many of them were killed, and they were called all the names, actually dehumanized. They were called cockroaches. They were called snakes. They were called many names. They were scapegoated with any problem in the country. They were the cause. This actually what happened. And then coming to my own family, my father was expelled outside the country and became a refugee in Burundi in 1973. And he left, but he had a fiance who remained behind. And the fiance, my mother, actually managed to join my father in Burundi in 1975, and they were married, and I was born in 1976. 2 years later, my dad actually had a car accident and they passed away. So the life became too difficult to my mother, who has a little child, and she was pregnant of second child, and she decided to leave the refugee lives. It was relative peace in the country, and she came back. Her direct family didn't leave the country. She went back and were living in a place called Kibui's west of country, and for sure that also you visited this place at some point. So 1981, she got married again, and we went to live with my stepfather. And then together with the new, my stepfather, my mom got 4 other children. They were all girls. This time was very hostile period. In the school, we've been really humiliated. We're very minority in the schools. We've been even teachers been teaching how to hate Tutsis, and all the names I just mentioned about, we were all snakes, and I was confused as a young child in the primary school. And I remember my mother was a teacher at the same school I was studying in, and when I went back home, I asked her a very difficult question, asking her why she chose to become a Tutsi, and she couldn't respond to me. And then I was really very serious in asking, why can't we change? Because we are snakes and we are bad people and we're all called all the names. And then it became a Hutu because they're good people. So she didn't have any answer at that time. But this because I was ignorant of what was going on. I didn't realize a little child that who we are, we didn't choose it. So this went on. The persecution of Tutsi within the country went on. Some been arrested. My mother was arrested 2 times because she was a Tutsi, and she'd been beaten and put into prison many times. And then in 1994, where I want to start actually, where actually all what I can say, the genocide that have been prepared for many years, now becoming at the, very, very, at the final solution, if I can say, was on 6th of April, when the plane that was carrying the former president of Rwanda was shot and he was killed in 1994. And then we didn't know because we were in the rural area, and we came to know about it. And myself, actually, on the radio was around 6 in the morning on 7th. I wake up in the morning. I was very happy that the president died, and I was thinking that he's the one who was really bringing problems to Tutsis. I want to knock on my parent door, and I asked, telling them the good news. And then when I spoke about it, my mother actually took like a 2 minutes, and she say, this will be the end of the Tutsis. And this was true, because the people, the government and the genocidal government managed to blame all this shot and those killing of the president to the Tutsis. But the research actually shown that the close family of the president actually organized this shot because they didn't like his politics, and then was really a little bit hurted within his inner family. So that was, they managed to blame on the Tutsis, and then that was also prepared because in the same morning, all the roadblocks were actually set. Every street and every road actually was, you had the roadblocks, and then there's no escape of Tutsis. We had the short family meeting where my mother asked me and said to me that probably you can go to seek hide at your colleague. His name is Jean-Pierre. He was my neighbor, and he was my colleague at the primary school. And I left because she was saying that probably they're looking for the boys and men to be killed at the first. That was not the case, of course. And at home, the family had some few money and food. And when all the time when the militias have been attacking home, they could manage to give them food, or can manage to give them some money. And this actually saved my family for 2 weeks. Within that 2 weeks, I was at Jean-Pierre's house. The Jean-Pierre's house was very poor family, and my mother knew that the family couldn't feed me like a 3 meal or 2 meals, and she will sneak each and every evening to come to see me, but bringing me some food as well. On 13th of April, she came to me, and actually her look was different. She was hopeless, she was crying, and she couldn't really talk to me as she used to do before. And she looked at my eyes, and she said that, Freddy, we may not see each other again, because what we had at home, food, money, actually was finished, and then there's not any food store back home. So we don't know if you can survive for next day. I couldn't believe it because I was really thinking that God will do something to save my mother. But she looked at me again. She gave me some fruits. These are passion fruits, and then beans and vegetables. She knew that I don't like beans, but she looked at me and say, "This is what's left at home." And she told me that, "Freddy, if you survive again, be a man." That was very encouraging words. Be a man is actually in our culture. Uzao Mugabo is like, help yourself, but you need to stand on your own feet. Because for Rwandans, you understand what that's mean, because it means that you may not have me tomorrow. But if you survived, be a man. She left me there, but that was true because on 14th of April, the militiamen came home. They killed them. They killed my mother. They killed my father, the stepfather. They beaten my sisters, who they finished actually next day. And a man, his name, John, and his brother, Habimana, they took my sisters before they died, and they thrown them into a long pit, and they were killed by the stones that actually they've been throwing on top of them. They've been crying, saying that we'll never be a Tutsi anymore. If you can help us and save us today. But they did not listen to them. They didn't save them. They killed them. I survived with my sister, the one that I mentioned that when we came from Burundi, my mother was pregnant of my sister. Her name is Rosette. She's still alive. God have helped me. We survived today, and we thank God. We survived by thinking what my last word with my mother, to be a man. I'm gonna try my best to represent my family. When it comes to forgiveness, you can imagine how difficult it was really right after genocide. It was really, really difficult to forgive and even to think about it. But what I realized and what I learned, forgiveness is a journey. I wouldn't even talk about forgiveness in 1994, 1995, 10 years after, I have to process it. The two things that helped me to start that journey, because what I realized, the most important thing is not really to say that I forgive. I have forgiven, but most important thing is to start the journey. But I have two things that helped me to start this journey. The first thing is, I was, when the genocide was stopped, and the genocide was stopped by the former refugees who formed the liberation movement who came to stop genocide while the whole international community was silent about it. And they managed to overthrow the genocidal government. Those who stopped it, actually, they lost their own families back in the country. And they had the moral authority to talk to survivors and say, don't revenge, please, because this cycle of violence will never stop and this country will never stand on its feet anymore if you continue revenge. But by that efforts by the new leaders to prevent revenge, as survivors and many other survivors in the country, we managed to buy time and to process our own feelings. The second thing that helped me to start this journey was the fact that I worked for Kigali Genocide Memorial, because this the memorial have helped me to understand my own situation, what happened to me, why I lost my people, and gave me strength to be who actually my mother wanted me to be. I really understood what happened to myself. And by that understanding, I was able to commit myself to be who I am and to love myself. And the fact that I start this journey, I find out also, and this is really from the experience and my own experience, that forgiving to those people who did all this to me is not really for them, it's for me. I want to do it for myself, for my own benefits. I want to forgive them because I don't want to be called today a survivor and tomorrow be called a perpetrator. That's really, this is not what I want to be, who I want to be. I did it I know those people. I can call the names. They were my neighbors. The time I started the journey for forgiveness. You can imagine, probably, you may ask me, you may ask me, is anyone who came to ask for forgiveness? No, because I was doing it for myself. I started for myself, and it was really, I understood this is my personal journey. I forgive John, who thrown my sisters into the long pit and killed them with all throwing the stone on top of them. But when I met him, because now he was put in jail and he's released, he's living with his family. When I met him, I told him that I forgive him. And this was really very difficult for me to say it and to face him, but I had to find the courage to do it. And since then, he was really hostile person in the village, and it is saved a lot in survivors who still actually neighbor to John. So I don't want to take too much time. I can talk very, very long, but I want to actually incite some questions. I'm really here for answering those questions as much as I can. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Freddy, for sharing that very powerful story. And I mean, I spent a lot of, like many people here, I spent quite some time in Rwanda, and I am just amazed by how so many people reason in the way you do, that it's not about the other person, it's about me. But you are one of the most joyous people I know, and with one of the biggest hearts. And I just admire you for the work you have done in forgiveness, although I do recognize it's taken time. Thank you for sharing that. And you can see in the chat, there are many beautiful comments for you with love and gratitude and a lot of powerful words. I'll let you scroll through. And we have one more powerful story to hear. And that is from Laura Ulloa from Colombia. And it's a little bit different in the sense that you didn't have that time because you were with the people that had taken something away from you you were with them for 7 months, and you were just a child. So you went through that process with them present, and which I think is also an amazing story. And thank you so much for joining us today, Laura. You're a new friend to me. It was Cristina de Armas who introduced us. So thank you to Cristina. I think she's here. And you're from Colombia, and you were kidnapped as a child, not once, but twice. And the second time you were 11 years old. And that's when you were in captivity that you decided to actually do something beautiful that you're going to share with us. And now you have worked a lot with the reconciliation process in Colombia with the National Organization for Integration. And I'm going to just, are you okay now, Laura? I saw you were crying previously. Are you okay now? Yeah, okay. So warm welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much. And I have to say that, Freddy, wow, your story is just so moving, so inspiring, but also such an example. I was very moved. But what I like about it and what I admire the most is that you decided, you know, to do it for yourself, to forgive for yourself, and that is the most greatest gift we can give to ourselves. So it's a pleasure to meet you and to share this space with you. Excuse me, very emotional. Okay, so I am from Colombia, from South America, and the story begins when I am 8 years old. The first time that I am going to receive communion after having my first communion ceremony. I am a Catholic. I was very happy, you know. I was that Sunday with my family at church, 200 other people. There were other kids who were receiving who were, you know, doing the line for the first time to receive communion with the adults. And before the priest was able to hand in communion to all, suddenly he was in the middle of the sermon, and a military man came into the church and went straight to the priest to tell him a secret nobody could hear. And after he had told him this secret, the priest immediately put his hands down and said to all of us, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt the mass because I have just been told by the military that there is one bomb underneath one of the cars parked just outside, meters away from us, and we have to evacuate. There were two big cars, trucks outside that they were going to take us to the military base. So everybody just went running. You know, there were older people, there were kids, everybody, like the people who go to church on a Sunday morning. And we all managed to get into those trucks. And after we weren't able to see outside the road, but when they finally arrived to the place and we were able to get out, we were not in the military base. We were all 200 people kidnapped by a terrorist group in Colombia. That was the first time in the world that a mass was kidnapped. I was absolutely scared because, you know, as a Colombian kid, I knew that I lived in a very dangerous country, but sometimes we used to hear these stories about kidnapping and bombs and things, but it is so different when we are living it in our own flesh. Fortunately, and to make this story a little bit short, that day my mother, my sister, and I, we were released. My father was going to go, but at the end he had some problems and he wasn't able to go to church. And he was very lucky because one of the first things these guerrillas did was to separate women and children from men. Men were taken and they were held in captivity for more than 6 months. But fortunately that day, my mother, my sister, and I, and a couple of two women and another child, we managed to escape. I remember next day saying to my sister as we were going to school again, she was telling me, Laura, that was so horrible. And I told her, you know what? We were lucky because we were kidnapped and now we're home. One day, it was fast, you know, and nobody gets kidnapped twice. So instead of feeling sad, you know, you have to feel we're lucky, we're alive. And that was like my thoughts on that time. 2 years later, 3 years later, I was going home from school in the school bus with my sister and 30 other children. And the bus was stopped. 5 men got into the bus. They were all heavily armed. And I was the only one who was dragged out of the bus, put into a car that was waiting outside, and then that car drove directly to the end of the road where the Cordillera, the Andes Cordillera, starts. I was the only one kidnapped that day. I was kidnapped this time by the other terrorist group in Colombia that is called the FARC. And I was held captive for 7 months. I just want to, to make this story also, try to shorten it as much as I can. The guy who took me out of the bus was a militia guy. He was not dressed as a military guerrilla, but as a civilian. And after he took me out and then took me into the mountain, we waited for about an hour. And then the real guerrilla, the ones that are dressed as military, heavily armed, they started to appear in between the trees. And when I saw them, this guy told me, okay, Laura, you're going with them. So every time that passed, I said to myself, this is getting worse. I'm getting farther from home. I'm getting, I'm being given to people who look even more dangerous. And I remember when I was walking towards these guys, the guy who took me out of the bus, who had his face covered, suddenly grabs my arm again from my back and turned me around and give me a hug. And he was hugging me so strong. I could hear his heart beating on my chest, and I was absolutely confused. And as he was hugging me, he said, Laurita, which is like a nice way of calling the little girl. Laurita, please forgive me. I am sorry. And I was so confused at that moment. I said, it's okay, don't worry. It's okay. I leave it like that. That day I was, I didn't know what happened. Maybe I didn't shout. I don't know why he was asking me for forgiveness. Everything started, these new people were very different to me. Sometimes I try to explain when I got into this group of people, of militaries. I was just 11 years old. I was wearing a school uniform. They were all in their camouflage clothes. And I remember I smiled at them, just, like, hi. Nobody smiled back. I felt they were like staring at me with disgrace, like if I was a person they disliked. But in the deep in me, in myself, I didn't know why they didn't like me. They didn't know me. But as time started to pass, I just felt they were so different to me. We had nothing in common. There were no middle spaces where we were able to connect. And I just said, I'm going to hate them as well as I feel they hate me, because that's the only maybe language we have in common is hate. I hate them because they're guerrillas and they're bad people, and they hate me because, as they used to say in Colombia, I maybe be part of this group of people who have some opportunities, and that because of that they do some harm to society, which is just not correct, but it's the way it works. And at the end, I just stopped talking to them. I decided I will not talk to them anymore. They will leave me the food out of my tent, and I would eat whatever I wanted, but never say thanks anymore. At the end of this, I thought maybe they will say, this girl is just so not nice. Maybe we could release her and, bring another one who's nicer or something. But that didn't work. And I was more alone than I could ever be because of what I was doing. This strategy was not working. So I remember one day I couldn't sleep, and I just woke up with this idea that maybe will work better than the other one. And I remember my tent had a little hole, and I started seeing the boots. I could only see the feet of these guys walking towards the place where they will always grab breakfast. And I started counting all of the boots. And when I knew they were almost all inside that place having breakfast, I stood, put my boots, because I had already been given boots by that time to be able to walk in the jungle. And I went straight to that place. My heart was beating so fast. I was so nervous. But you know, when you have a call, you have to do things, and maybe that can change. And I remember I stood in front of the entrance. There were, I don't know, 20 gorillas, heavily armed. Their faces were very mean or strong, I don't know. And I just looked at them and I said, "Hi, good morning." Everybody looked at me. "Did you sleep well?" And I remember one of the guys said, "Yes, you want breakfast? Okay." That day I had breakfast with them for the first time in maybe a month. And at the end, one of the guys stood and said, "I have to go cut down a tree so I can bring some wood. Would you like to come, Laura?" And at that moment, I said to myself, "Oh my God, to the woods with a guy with a hatch after I've been, you know, not being a nice person." But also I said, maybe I want them to trust me, that I have good intentions. So I said, okay, yes, let's go. That day, I saw for the first time in my life someone cutting down a tree, because I lived in a city. I helped him, you know, taking some wood to the camp. I felt useful for the first time. The days before, I used to sleep as much as I could, because I didn't want to be, you know, conscious. I didn't want to accept that I was kidnapped, that 1 day and 2 days and 3 days had gone past and I was still there. But that day, the day ran faster and I felt useful. And even though I was sad because I was kidnapped, because my family was missing me, I felt different. And after that time, you know, there were 6 months ahead. I didn't know, because every time I used to ask, when am I going to be released? They would say the same, for 7 months. Don't worry, Laura, 2 or 3 days. So that was at the end. I just stopped asking when, because they would have always the same answer. But from that day on, I can say things started to change, because I decided I wanted to know a little bit more. I wanted to know them better. And I wanted them also to know me better. I didn't want them to judge me because what they thought I was. And I didn't want to judge them because of what I thought they were. Yes, they were criminals. Yes, they were doing bad things. But I knew that we had things in common. For the first thing, we were Colombians. We were born in the same soil. So I believe something really special started to happen, and was that they opened to me to tell me their stories, why they were there. I couldn't understand in my mind, why have they left their homes, their family, their school? Why could they ever decided to join a guerrilla group? And I actually understood that many of their lives kind of forced them to take that decision, because becoming part of a guerrilla was a lifesaver for many of them. Many of them had a lot of trauma in their homes, not only because of extreme poverty, but because of violence, and other issues that I just couldn't realize in my mind that happened to other kids. When I was kidnapped, I heard from for the first time of a girl who had been abused, and when she told me that, and her eyes were full of tears, I couldn't even understand what that meant. What was to be abused? Abuse of what? And that was also a difference we had. It was a difference between them and I. Maybe I've had a nice childhood together with my family, having opportunities, but that changed forever the fact of what I thought they were, and also for them what they thought I was. At the end, 7 months later, I was about to be released. I was about to see my father just coming. He was picking me up. And I remember one of the guerrillas they were always like 15 people with me, whom at the end I told them they were my insecurity ring, and we will all laugh. And this guy told me, Laura, I'm so sad that you are now going and we're never going to see you again. But I hope you don't say in the media that we treated you bad, or you say lies, you know? And I said, I'm going to tell the truth, and I'm going to tell what I liked and what I didn't like, and what you did wrong and what you did right. But just for you to know, I will be back here, and I'm going to become a guerrilla when I turn 18 years old. And at that time I was 12. And I truly believe that was the best thing I could do, because I knew that there were good people there, but there were very bad leaders. So I just wanted to go back and lead them to do good things. They released me. I left them notes with the phone number of my house, the address, and my mother's phone number in case I was not home, because I truly believe they were not doing anything bad to me anymore. Long story short, they called me for many years. When I graduated from school, I decided to study political science. I did an internship at the UN in New York at the Security Council, because I wanted to learn how other countries were able to achieve peace, and I wanted to come to Colombia with more tools to help my country. I came back and started to work at the Colombian Agency for Reintegration, which is the agency that promotes DDR, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration in Colombia. And since then, I've been sharing my story and promoting reconciliation and forgiveness in Colombia. When I was just released, I told my story in the media. Nobody liked it. 2002, nobody wanted to hear the story of a 12-year-old girl who had forgiven their perpetrators, because at that time there were 5,000 people kidnapped in Colombia. And when I realized nobody liked that story, that I was being judged, I just said, you know, for the respect of other people, I'm just going to keep my story for me, won't tell it anymore. And then almost 15 years later, I was called again while Colombian government was holding a peace process with the guerrilla. I was called, Laura, we want to know about your forgiveness story. I said, oh my God, okay, let's do it again. And I shared this story and it became viral. And I was very, very happy, because for the first time in my life, I said, you know, maybe now the country is ready to talk about forgiveness, because I believe that a country that has so profound wounds, that doesn't start talking about forgiveness or reconciliation, is a country that just cannot thrive. So that's my story, I will say. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing that story. And the power of storytelling individual experiences is so strong. And I think we're all very, very touched by this. And I see all the comments in the chat there's a lot of love being sent to you. You can scroll through it now. And I know this is just part of your big story, but it's a very powerful story. And as a moderator, this is a time when you get really nervous. How do I sum this up? How do I analyze and draw conclusions from these two stories? But fortunately, I have the best help I can get, and that is our third speaker today, and that is Jonathan Tirrell, who is a professor and researcher at Tufts University. And you have done a lot of research on this very topic, forgiveness, and written books about it. And you have been spending a lot of time in Rwanda, and also you've been to Colombia. And So I'm going to gently hand over to you the conclusion of these powerful stories. Very welcome, Jonathan. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Usa. It's truly a humbling and inspiring pleasure to be here. I like that you make light of how difficult it is to reflect on and to kind of summarize these stories. I would love to start by saying I'm at a loss for words, so forgive me in advance for tripping over just how powerful and inspiring these stories are. It's reading through the chats, it's incredibly humbling to see how really equipped and encouraged and empowered people become just from hearing your stories, Freddy and Laura. So truly thank you, and I'm so grateful to be here. So just to pull some, I think, meaningful themes from these stories, what forgiveness means. In the very beginning, we asked what makes it most difficult to forgive? What are the obstacles? And most of you, we saw anger and pride and pain, all these emotions that we, as individuals, experience that prevent us from moving forward and from thriving. With that in mind, I want to introduce first what forgiveness is not. I also saw some questions about what does forgiveness truly mean in these circumstances. I think it's easiest first to summarize what forgiveness is not, what it does not involve, because these conflations or these confusions, this lack of conceptual clarity is really a hindrance to many people for forgiving. So number one, forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiving is not forgetting. Desmond Tutu in our introductory video, he's known for saying that amnesia, forgetting the transgression, the offense, is the most dangerous thing for any community, country, nation, because you risk repeating the cycles of violence that Freddy spoke about, that cycle of violence that only perpetuates when revenge is sought as compared to forgiveness. Second, forgiveness is not necessarily reconciling. Sometimes the offender might not be a known or close person. It might not be someone who's still alive, as Usa introduced. Although reconciliation may come from the forgiveness process, it is not necessarily about restoring a relationship, although we'll come back to that momentarily. And lastly, I think one of the biggest hindrances is that forgiveness is not pardoning. It's not justifying or condoning or excusing an offense. It is not an antithesis to justice. In my work with some of my Rwandan colleagues and friends, forgiveness is actually a facilitator of justice. And I'll talk about that in a moment as well, very briefly. But going back to Freddy's story, so recognizing first that it's not forgetting or reconciling and pardoning, Freddy talked how it was a 10-year journey for him to come to forgive. So to talk first about what forgiveness is now, it is a process. It is a process that takes time, that takes respect and pain, and it is a transformative process. And it is one that is, we call intrapersonal. It is within yourself. It is an intrapersonal process involving a pro-social change. So you are taking this anger, this bitterness, this resentment, and trying to release it or relinquish it or even convert it into something positive, such as compassion or generosity or even love for the other person. Now, we have a colleague, Ann Maston, who writes about resilience, resilient functioning, and she describes it as ordinary magic. It is ordinary magic to go through trauma and oppression or injustice and to survive and to function well, to function resiliently. If resilience is ordinary magic, I argue that forgiveness is extraordinary magic. It is this magical phenomenon of truly turning anger into love. And what does that mean? And even when the anger may be justified and deserved, one of the major hindrances, the reasons why we have this anger, is thinking that the other person does not deserve that forgiveness, does not deserve to be pardoned, even though we understand now that forgiveness is not pardoning. This person does not deserve to be recognized as a human worthy of inherent dignity and respect, because we conflate the offense with the individual. And so that anger spirals downward. And to go back to the stories of Laura and Freddy, what I found most encouraging and empowering is that speaking of that story, when you're holding on to unforgiveness, it is a story of victimhood and of oppression, and that you are the victim of the story. I did not get the sense from either of these stories, even though the incredible, I pause because there is no word, the incredible atrocities and challenges that they've suffered, they talk about the story as almost a source of strength. Freddy talking about the inspiring words from his mother, and Lara talking about seeing the humanity in this individual, hearing the heartbeat as he hugged her and asked for forgiveness, and seeing the humanity and sharing a meal with them. So really rehumanizing the individual that has become so dehumanized through the offense or through the transgression, through the division and through the polarization that is so salient in our world today. I could go on and on. I'll just close with a couple points about this process of forgiveness. I know we want to share or save a lot of time for reflection, but Ev Worthington and Bob Enright, other scholars that are kind of the shoulders whose the giants whose shoulders I stand upon in forgiveness research, excuse me. They talk about forgiveness as this process, and what is most interesting to me and perhaps most helpful is that Worthington notes that there are two kinds of forgiveness. One is decisional forgiveness. It's where you decide that you want to let go of this anger and this bitterness and resentment. It is recognizing that you yourself are the one suffering from hanging on to unforgiveness. Someone put a quote in the chat about how holding on to unforgiveness or holding on to anger and bitterness is like swallowing a poison pill and waiting for your enemy to die. Mark Guamaka in the introductory video said that when you do not forgive, you prepare two graves, one for yourself and for the offender. So that decisional forgiveness is the first one. That alone may take time. For Freddy, it was 10 years. However, deciding to forgive does not necessarily equate or correlate with immediately the emotional release of forgiveness, which is the second kind of forgiveness, emotional forgiveness. That again takes time, it takes work, it takes internalizing that story of the oppression, the injustice, and finding source of strength in that. That is when you experience that emotional release, or you come to see the other again as a human with dignity and respect, that they may be a hurt person, and that's what led them to hurt others, to hurt people. So again, with that process of deciding to forgive, to experiencing that emotional release of forgiveness, it is a process, it takes time, it is something you do for yourself, and there may be implications for others for building, restoring that relationship. Again, I could go on and on about the restorative justice approaches and how forgiveness interrelates here. Usa, you gave such a generous introduction to me, and I would be happy to continue this conversation. I think at this point it'd be most productive to continue that conversation with you all. So thank you all for being here. This is truly a very special gathering to hear these stories and to be so encouraged and inspired by them. So it's humbling to be here, and thank you. I look forward to sharing more.
Thank you, Jonathan. One thing is for sure, I couldn't have done that better myself. And after these three extraordinary sharings that we've had, it is time for you to digest this in breakout groups. And we have a few questions that we encourage you to center your discussions around. I do believe that you all learned something from what these three people. And did it change your perspective, or how did it change your perspective on forgiveness? In the beginning of this session, we asked you to identify one obstacle to forgiveness, and you mentioned that in the chat. Is it still valid for you, or have you changed your perspective in that sense? Did the panel help you find other qualities you think are important in order to be able to forgive? And then, of course, if you have time, how could forgiveness contribute to sustainable development in your context? But focus on the questions that are relevant for you in the group. And I have a small piece of advice. When you reflect in the groups, try to practice your listening skills. We have been listening to Laura and Freddy and Jonathan, and try to listen to each other, because there's always a very strong story behind every person. And now, Ola, how much time do we have for the breakout groups? We need them back by 10 to 5, is that correct?
Yes, if we'll take 10 minutes, I think we should be able to round off.
Yeah.
What do you say?
10 minutes is good. And we will send you randomly into groups, and then we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. So enjoy your discussions. Hope you had good discussions in your breakout groups. And Ulloa, how do you want to harvest now from the people who are here, their thoughts, their ideas?
Yes. I would invite us all to just the simplest format possible, actually, to just to write, if you want to share something from your discussion, just to share what was top of mind, like what comes really alive for you right now after this conversation and after listening to our contributors. So we'll take the harvesting or sharing in the chat.
In the chat. So the current feeling after the session and also after the discussions.
Yeah. Love and interconnectedness. Privileged and blessed to be here to listen and share.
Give for yourself. Yeah, that's powerful.
Love, beautiful stories and perspective. How do I overcome anger to forgive others? An act of bravery. Humanity is drawn to forgive.
Yeah, I can see bravery coming up from several people. And that was actually something we reflected on we were also in a small group. And I think it was an act of bravery that both these people have showed. And Laura said, I feel I'm also a real man or something like that. And I would totally agree with that. Both Laura and Freddy are big personalities. And Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Definitely.
Courage, vulnerability. Yes.
So thank you to all of you for jumping in and for sharing with each other in the small breakout rooms, and for being available for that as well. Very much see it as an important part of the Inner Development Goal gatherings to offer this opportunity to dive into the skills and the competencies and these qualities that are needed to really further and to make headway on the Sustainable Development Goals in general, and for humanity and for the planet. We warmly thank Freddy and Laura and Jonathan, who will stay on as well for the afterglow, the coming half hour. And if you want to join that group, you are very much welcomed to do so. And there's also an opening to really have conversations about what it is, or how we can create and to develop our Inner Development Goal hubs across the globe, for those of you who want to get involved in that, because we are indeed like building this movement together. There's also some information to be shared at this point before we round off the official part of this gathering. I would like to invite Fatima, if you would just share the information about the next month's gathering.
Yes.
That'd be okay.
I would love to. Please pencil in the 23rd of March. Then we're gonna listen to sharings from Caroline Casey, who started a valuable 500, And what they work with is super interesting because they work with disability inclusion in big organizations, in companies. And she will share about that, but also how the disability inclusion can also be used for including many other aspects of humanity into the organizations. So same time, the 23rd of March, and the link is there from Ulla. Perfect. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And before we finish, of course, if you want to know more about the inner development goals, if you are not already completely updated, there is a website, www.innerdevelopmentgoals.org, and that is also where you can find out more about the community. I can see here that there is something also in the chat. And thank you for all your wonderful comments in the chat. Somebody said that now from this session, I have been able to forgive. And I think that is so beautiful. So once again, thank you to the panelists. You at least helped one person to forgive today. And that is big.
We also have the big sort of movement builder for this year. What we're building up towards in these gatherings as well is the IDG Summit in October, the 10th to or 11th to 12th of October, there's still early bird registration, but also that is an opportunity for us to join both IRL in Stockholm and also digitally, of course, from around the globe. And some very, very great people will be coming to both speak and to meet there as well. Before we go into the afterglow, shall we round off in our traditional way, or the way that has become traditional as we build culture in this movement, is by everybody just unmuting and saying thank you and goodbye in your language. And for those who want to stay on after that, we'll stay on after that. So
muchas gracias. Feliz día. Gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Hasta pronto.
Gracias. Eti.
Shukran.
Okay. Bye.